So many years ago, I was sitting in a very busy coffee shop in New York City, and the chair opposite me was empty. So a nice woman with a baby asked if she could sit there. And I said, sure. And after a few minutes, she asked me what I did for a living. Now, you have to understand, at this point in my life, I was just a few months out of drama school and still very excited to share my profession with anyone who cared to know. So I said, I'm an actor, beaming. And I remember her sizing me up, looking at me very skeptically before asking, how's that working out for you? She then fell into a very loud and cackling laughter. I probably should have told her the seat was taken. But the point is, if you've been an actor or an artist long enough, it's likely you've experienced some version of this story. But contrary to what most people think, what makes being an actor or an artist so difficult is how mentally tough you need to be. Of course, the lack of opportunities and the constant rejection and the fierce competition can take its toll, but because a life devoted to telling stories and creating art is an endeavor filled with so much solitude, you end up spending a great deal of your time battling the voices in your own head, telling you what you do isn't meaningful or real profession. Now, when I first got out of theater school, it was a very exciting time. I was about to finally begin a dream I'd had since I was 11 years old, to be a storyteller. And I was lucky enough to be signed by a great agent, which allowed me to get into rooms in front of major casting directors for big plays and TV shows and commercials and feature films. I have to say, to be a young actor in New York City was pretty exciting. But during this time, I was also going through a lot of personal challenges. I had just left a school where I felt very comfortable. I was struggling in my personal relationships because, to be quite honest with you, I was so focused on myself, I really failed to be there for the people who needed me most. And I just felt completely in over my head, unsure of how to navigate this new and very confusing world. I looked everywhere for help. And like all of you, at one point in life or another, I needed a compass, a blueprint, a North Star to show the way. But all I could find were places to get the best headshots or ways I could impress a casting director. There was almost nothing on developing the actor's mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. How can there not be more support for these highly sensitive people in the most competitive industry on the planet? I remember thinking to myself. So I decided to set out on a new path and try to answer that very question. And I knew it was something others also wanted to know, because as I got older, many of my younger actor friends started asking for advice. They wanted to know what lessons I learned in all my years as an actor, as a writer, as a filmmaker, as a community outreach volunteer and traveler. All roles that helped shape a very unique take on the business, but far more importantly, how to live a well-rounded life offstage that would enrich the quality of the work on it. And in time, the mission became to help other actors and artists find ways to empower themselves in an industry that too often feels disempowering. Eventually, I came up with 6 principles that I hope will help you on your journey, regardless of your passion or pursuit. Now, number 1 was to keep learning. Now, for years, I read nothing but plays and scripts. I learned a ton about great storytelling. But if you asked me what was going on in the world, I'd probably give you the same look the woman in the coffee shop gave me, right? I was a one-dimensional person. But now, I realize the importance of knowing a little about a lot. I read everything I could get my hands on about history, philosophy, psychology, science, leadership, and finance. I no longer pored over just the words of Shakespeare and Odets, but now turned to Emerson and Plato. I made a greater effort to diversify my knowledge and to broaden my understanding of the world. Because with each discovery about a new subject comes a big window to someone else's world, making you realize how limited yours may have been. And in time, with the more you learn, you will find yourself slowly developing into a person who refuses to be defined by just one thing. Now, for me, acting was what I did, but it was no longer who I was. Number 2 was travel. Now, I'd always been very lucky when it came to travel, but now I use it as a way to infuse new perspective into my life. And though I'd been lucky to see much of the world, I discovered I didn't always have to go very far to see or to learn something new. For example, you don't need your passport to hop on the 2 train and wander the Botanic Gardens in Brooklyn or to catch the bus to City Island. Each place, whether near or far, offers you a chance to meet new people and challenge the assumptions you have about them. Seeing a new world allows you to step out of your own, a place riddled with misunderstandings and limited thinking. But I tell you, the greatest lesson I learned was I didn't have all the time in the world to see and to do all the things I said I wanted to. So it was important to just begin. Whenever possible, develop and follow your sense of curiosity, and always protect your inner tourist. Number 3 was service to your community. And whether building a house in Haiti or serving food at a homeless shelter in Pasadena, society just works best when we all help each other out a little bit. Now look, I wasn't saving the world, but by helping out for a few hours each week, I was making the effort to be of service to my fellow neighbor with the hope they might someday do the same for someone else. And the most important lessons were often the simplest and the least expected. In the summer of 2014, I traveled to one of the hottest places I'd ever been to in my life, Nepal. I spent several weeks at an orphanage in a place called Chitwan. It's a city about 100 miles or so southwest of Kathmandu. Now, during the second week of my stay, the kids and I had to go out and gather food for dinner. And the night before, it had rained heavily for hours, which meant trudging through heavy mud to get to the harvest. In fact, the sludge was so thick, I remember instantly losing one of my sandals, never to be seen again. My entire body was caked in mud. It was well over 100 degrees, and in less than an hour, I was completely exhausted. I remember staring at the ground, starting to feel sorry for myself, wondering why on earth I had agreed to be here. But when I looked up, I saw children laughing and playing, turning this back-breaking work into a game. They had simply made the choice to be happy. These were kids without parents, forced to wear ragged hand-me-down clothes, go to school at 6 o'clock in the morning to beat the afternoon heat, and sleep together in cramped rooms with no air conditioning. And yet not once did I hear a single complaint. This had a profound influence on me because just a few weeks before, I had been whining about being dropped by an agent in New York City. These kids took me to school. They taught me there will always be someone in the world worse off than you. Service to others is a great way to discover new things about yourself. Happiness is a choice, and helping people help themselves gives integrity to your ambition. If anybody here is looking for a crash course on understanding the bigger picture, then service to others is your answer. Number 4, I learned that you have to define success on your own terms. Now, not making tons of money or seeing my face plastered on a billboard in the middle of Times Square on Sunset Boulevard, it didn't mean I wasn't a successful actor. In fact, to me, the real superstars were people like my friend Gerald, who would work a double shift and then carry her heavy keyboard all the way from Lower Manhattan to the Bronx for a performance that started at midnight. Or Maria, who worked all day at a law office, but still found time to perform in a quiet stage reading in a bookstore after work. These were the artists forced to bend time and babysit and teach and wait tables just so they could pursue something they loved. And they inspired me with their passion and their spirit and their grit to find some way, any way, to sing, to write, to act, or to play. And they taught me to push forward and to take the time to recognize victories along the way, because success to them was becoming great at something you love to do. And attainment of your goal was not the point, but rather who you became in the process. Number 5, I learned that you have to create your own opportunities. Now, this one took me a long time to figure out, but it's very likely that that phone call for the perfect part or opportunity is never going to come. So you need to create it. Now, back in theater school, it didn't matter the color of Hamlet's skin or the shape of Ophelia's eyes, because like all of you, we all understood that nobody had a monopoly on the human condition. But unfortunately, the industry's imagination really paled in comparison. And as a result, I wasted so much time complaining about the unfairness of Broadway and Hollywood instead of doing something about it. And with the amazing technology available at your fingertips, you have no excuse to not get started. Instead of waiting for that phone to ring, start writing your story through blogs and plays and short films and one-person shows. Start that business or write that book. Because today, all you need is a smartphone and an idea. And it will not be about the number of followers or hits that you get, but the satisfaction you will gain in starting and finishing something important to you. You have more control over creating your own opportunities and getting your voice out into the world than you have been led to believe. And remember, there is enough of the pie for all of us. Your success does not have to come at the expense of your failure. Lastly, I learned that dreams change, and that's okay. Because what you want at 25 will be different than what you want at 45. It doesn't mean that you've quit a dream. It just means that you've grown as a person, and the things that you value most in life are now different. During my last year at school, a very talented teacher who directed my class in our final play, she pulled us all aside after a pretty tough rehearsal, and she said, "The more you build who you are as a person, how you educate yourself, how you identify, what interests you in the world, the issues you care about, all of those things will help make you a better performer." And so years later, I decided to finally take her advice as I wrestled with my own doubts of whether or not to continue acting. I took classes to improve my awful computer skills. I tried learning a new language, and I was by far the oldest intern a local politician had ever seen. I was rejected by every graduate school I applied to as I considered a career change, and I discovered that I was good at some things, but not so good at others. But you know what all these experiences taught me? Was that all of those years in voice class and movement class and acting class had very little to do with being an actor after all. Instead, we were being taught to take risks, to speak our minds, to be lifelong learners, to do something kind for someone else. And if we were lucky, we might become great actors in the process. The point was to be open to where life might take you, to live a life, and not just a career. So, the next time you are sitting across from someone, mumbling lines to themselves, or sketching a drawing in a noisy coffee shop, please know the person across from you is a three-dimensional individual who may have extraordinary lessons to offer beyond their art form. They have a story, just like you. All you need to do is ask. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.